Hi everyone, this is Rebecca Gallagher, and this is my Module 8 self-assessment on my online curriculum. Just a little background before I dive in. I'm sure if you've been following any of the things that I've put up is that my class is life skills. So take some things into consideration are the fact that my students never really did fully online learning because with special ed, they're entitled to a certain amount of hours in school. So while the districts were shut down, um, we only had about 2 months ourselves where we were at home before we were back in school working with our students in person with masks and such things. So it was never really asynchronous. So with this assignment, I did attempt to make it more asynchronous. And I will discuss also how I intend to use that to or adapt this online project into using for next year um, in my classroom. Sorry, did not want to go. So what I did is I used a for my class, this is a functional math class, so we are teaching real world skills. And this one was all about the use of money and banking and budgeting. So I broke down each standard by one, two, three, and four, like most of us probably did. And I talk about it, and then I'm going to get into how I used it. And then I actually created a pros and cons list on each standard of where I think I fell short and where I could do better, as well as I also thought I did pretty well on. So all of us have done our assignment, so I'm not going to read each one of these to you. I'm just kind of going to dive in. But it does talk about, making sure that we have an effective online instruction and we create learning experiences to enable student success, and that we're using a range of technologies that support student learning and engagement, and that we are making sure that the diversity of students' academic needs are met and we're incorporating accommodations into the online learning. So for this, I put down up my objectives, the IEP goals that I need to monitor, and then the modifications that I made for a lot of my students in this. Like I said, it's a functional learning class where I develop IEP goals that meet state objectives and then hopefully work together to create functional outcomes. I did use multi-factor learning modules and instructions. It was synchronous and asynchronous, and it was scheduled routines because that is desperately what my students need. Is it has to be the same, so that makes it a little bit difficult for me when I want to um, do things outside their comfort zone or projects that might work in a regular ed class. You can't really give life skills so much freedom because they it's too much for them, too much sensory, too many things going in at once. So it has to be pretty much the same every day or along the same lines. So some of the objectives, I didn't put it in my Google Classroom because a lot of my students aren't super independent readers. So these objectives wouldn't make any sense to them and it would just be another thing on the page that might confuse them. So I just usually put them in my own notes. But anyway, it goes through identifying coins up to making sure you can do change, ability to make a purchase, that kind of situation. A lot of their goals were using like the dollar up methods or giving items with a price tag and an imaginary budget. The student will be able to purchase items with the correct amount of money. And then I also put on a few of like the modifications that I did for some of my students, such as, they're able to use voice to talk, the ones that need to do that. Either have access to iPads or actually just use the speak in Google sometimes where it just puts it into, they talk into it and it just fills that little search bar. And a lot of them, they'll just copy and paste it because it's the thing they're most familiar with. Um, I do have one nonverbal student, so I will go over how I did use to reach him in a lot of our pictures and real life activities within our work. A lot of my students are on varying levels, so I did tend to gear this one towards my higher students because they were able to work a little bit more asynchronous. So some of my pros and cons. My pros, I said that the use of I use several different types of frameworks. I have an understanding of online, hybrid, and blended learning, and when you look at my Google Classroom, you can see that. And probably the most notable is accommodating and modifying curriculum to customize their learning because my students are on all different types of levels. There's things that read out loud. There's limited collaborative learning, which I'll go into a little bit later, and there's frequent daily check-ins. That is every week. I do meet with each student for their goals. The thing that I thought was my biggest con in the delivery section of mine was my standard B. I need to make sure that I'm using more than one type of technology. I seem to stick to the Google Classroom slides, forms. I struggle with creating ways for my students to present, to be more, to offer different types of like learning in incorporating games or Flipgrids. I tried to do that and I really struggled with it this time. But I think that's one area of this where I really could use some work is using a few more types of technology. All right, so I'm going to go ahead over, but with the delivery, it's making sure that the teacher plans, designs, and incorporates strategies to encourage active learning, application, interaction, participation, and collaboration. So in this, all my classes have SEL. I do a morning meeting in the mornings. My kids are with me all day. So a lot of the times in my morning meetings, I will introduce our topics for the day. And one of them is, we talk about math and what their fears are with math because some of my kids really hate it while some of them really love it. And it actually gives them a chance to talk to each other. And share why they love it and why they dislike it. And I've noticed that in these moments, I see my students being like, oh, well, this kid doesn't like this part of math. And so when it happens, they tend to go over and work with them or check on them. I do weekly check-ins. All my content is buildable. As you can see, I put up here my daily outline where it starts with we build from just reminding ourselves, we do a pre-assessment, but also every day they're doing something that is an old skill for it builds up self-confidence as well as it's a good refresher and reminder. So every day with life skills, I tend to have to do some pre-knowledge every day. So a lot of the times you'll see something that's really simple as sorting the coins when we're actually on adding and doing change. However, those small things a lot of the times really help my students, build on that knowledge and reminds them. I am available every day for them to meet with if there's ever anything unclarified. Some pros and cons about my delivery. I thought I used SEL strategies pretty well in my class. A lot of the students have to have self-regulation, their social stories. Again, I do accommodate and modify curriculum to customize their learning environment. There's multiple levels, frequent check-ins. Once again, I do have collaborative learning there again. That is also, we'll see again in the cons later on because it's something I feel that I did, but not enough of. Standard A, I think communication with communication with peers and interaction with other students was one of my cons. There is not really an opportunity in this that I created for them to work with their students in their groups at all. However, next year, I want to use this lesson in my classroom. I do stations, so I want to make an asynchronous station and then one where a peer station. So I'm hopefully going to have them do asynchronous and then work together to correct it. So I'm hopefully going to incorporate that. But that is definitely one thing that I notice I'm missing in this work is interactions with other students. I'm going to breeze through assessment because I'm just going to go right to this page and just show my layout of assessments. Every day when we were in person or synchronously, there was a ticket out. Every day they're doing, we had a pre-assessment. There's the ticket out, which was something super simple. Again, just like their warm-ups. There's whoops, I'm so sorry. There's assessments, wrong way, sorry. There's assessments that are real world based, as you can see down here that we did do something related to Domino's, where they're actually ordering and they have a budget. So I really felt like I did cover summative and formative assessments fairly well, because every day there's one and I'm able to look at it and see if we're progressing towards their goals. Some pros and cons. My pros, like I said, I did multiple formative and summative. There's daily check-ins, ticket outs, submitted work. There is an open book vocabulary. I hope I created an even playing field for all my students. I feel like I did. I did put over here in cons the, more options with assessments, like including presentations, videos, other things, and not just tests, I think is something I need to work on, especially in math classes. Emerging trends. This one I thought I did fairly well. This is stuff I do in all my classes. Making sure I'm communicating and encouraging, that I'm available to the students. I have office hours every day. I do monthly letters home where the parents know what we're doing, so that they can work on them with that at home. I also do progress monitoring that has to go home, and stay up to date with current special ed laws. And I'm always available for my parents or my students. Especially in special ed or life skills, you have to have a positive relationship with the parents, especially if you want them to do things outside of school and to actually practice some of this real world things. And lastly, what does the future hold? So I'm definitely going to be continuing my education at Millersville. My degree is in special ed. However, I want to take a few more technology courses because I felt like I really did learn and I was pushed to get a little bit more outside my comfort zone, which is, strictly all online asynchronous because I'm so hands-on with my students. I want to incorporate more technology into my classroom, not just Google Classroom. I want to get more comfortable with the Flipgrids. I do use Kahoot a lot. My kids love Kahoot, but I want to branch out. A lot of my students receive assistive technology for special ed, so I have several kids that, use a communication device to speak with me, or we take pictures so that they can type rather than handwrite, or record. I want to take more classes so I can figure out ways to incorporate these online learning into assistive tech and hopefully, make some of my students find technology that strengthens some of their deficits. So next year, for one, I know we are not doing at all a hybrid model or online. It's either going to be our online school period or in person, which my kids will all be in person. However, I want to incorporate stations more. I usually run in fours, and before I was doing at one station, it was either like Prodigy or um, very simple math things and games for them to do. But taking this course, I would really like to set up a whole other lesson online asynchronously that they work on while they're getting their direct instruction with me on every other day. So I really am going to keep this money one and use it again in next year. I'm pretty excited that I've got this set up so I can start with it next year. I just want to take a minute and say thank you all so much for all your great feedbacks and critiques. And thank you again.